Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the OverSeers. My name is Proilios and I'm joined by Nightwing. We don't have OneHP with us today since he's quite busy with work, but I think we've got this covered, don't you, Nightwing?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to talk about, I think.
Yeah, so we'll be covering the San Francisco Shock today. We'll be reviewing the roster for Season 4 of the Overwatch League, and this is going to be an exciting one because two-time league champions and they've won so many stage playoffs at this point that they're just like they're already really high on everyone's power rankings. So we are gonna see what ideas we have to pitch about them, share our opinions on their tanks first, then the DPS, then the supports, the coaching stuff, and then round things off with our final thoughts. So without further ado, let's start off with the tank line then, shall we, Nightwing?
Sure.
Alright. So the tank line for the Shock is still pretty much the same as it has been since season 2. They've got Super and Smurf on main tank and ChoiHyoBin on off tank. Obviously, they don't have Nevix since he went to the Defiant in season 3. Uh, but yeah, let's talk about these guys. And I think I'll let you go first. Actually, let's see what you have to say about the tanks.
I mean, you know how it is. Smurf is the staple monkey player. He can bust out maybe his Urisa or maybe his ball at times, I think. Um, Super is always there with the Ryan, obviously. They consistently played him on the Ryan like every single time when it would come to maps like King's Row. With the kind of like rush comp that they would play with uh, Ryan, uh, Super playing Ryan and Moth playing Lucio, which worked pretty well for them. I think they were almost perfect on that map, barring maybe a few losses. And Smurf would see the same thing, but on Hanamura with like monkey play mostly, or sometimes double shield, where they would barely lose on Hanamura. I mean, the main tanks are just super solid. I think there is basically nothing to complain about on the main tank side. I think on the off tank side, Choi has been absolutely one of the best off tanks, and there is a point like there's definitely an argument to be made that he is like the best off tank um, in the league. Obviously, there are people in contention like Void. Um, But I think Choi has been super consistent, and the guy has really not had a vacation at all for the past 2 seasons. Um, I think it might just be kind of kind to him if they signed an off-tank player just to relieve some stress off of him. But I don't know who you would sign that you would play over Choi. So I guess he's just stuck with grinding every day until his health gives out, I guess. But the Shock is a good dog. They're probably taking good care of him. That's all I really have to say. I think they're going to be great in season 4 as well. I think they have basically every base covered. Super came in for the Hog as well during the kind of Hog Zarya thing that they were starting to pick up, or the Hog Sigma, uh, kind of whatever they wanted to play. I think the great thing about the Shock is that their main tanks don't have like there is no singular main tank that has to learn uh, every main tank's intricacies over and over, like all the way through, which helps them actually develop an incredibly high kind of level with their respective tanks, which is probably what the difference maker for this team is. That's pretty much all I have to say, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. So overall, I think the Shock's reliable and stable tank line has been one of the main reasons they've been so meta proof, right? Because they've got Super covering the Reinhardt, like you said. Uh, really, one of the best Rhines in the professional Overwatch scene. They've got Smurf covering the other three main tanks, that's Winston, Orisa, and Ball. And Smurf's just top tier, right? I think he is one of the best main tanks in the league. Um, I won't say the same about Super since his hero pool isn't that wide when it comes to like being able to professionally play all the heroes at a top level. But he's still like a good player. Having him as like a good vocal player, as a shot caller, a leader, that makes a big difference to the team. Is what got them through most of the GOATs meta in season 2. Um, and yeah, I think Super Smurf, they really just complement each other's hero pools that way. And of course, they've got ChoiHyoBin on off tank, who's just great and versatile. He has one of the best divas in the league, one of the best sigmas. His hog was really nutty in season 2, and I'm sure it's as good even today. They just played super on hog because they were reserving Choi for the sigma in the season 3 playoffs. So this tank line has pretty much got all the bases covered, right? Probably the only thing I would be worried about is the absence of a Zarya player. Uh, but they Zarya's rarely ever meta these days, and even if like she is meta, I think Choi plays a decent Zarya, so that's not an issue either way. Uh, s-
Smurf plays a Smurf plays a nasty Zarya if you see him playing in ranked. Obviously, the owl level is different, but it is a treat to watch him actually flex his mechanics instead of just tasering people with monkey. If you actually watch his stream, uh, obviously that's not a substitute for a real Zarya player. Sometimes even hitscan players will move on to that role if specifically Zarya needs to be played.
mhm.
But yeah, that might seem like a gap, but I think Shock has it covered. Honestly,
Oh yeah,
I
for sure.
think I think in the last season you are right though. I think Zarya play did seem a little bit weak compared to when they were facing off against Washington Justice with their redemption, revenge, like death team in the
Yeah,
playoffs.
yeah,
Um, yeah, if I remember correctly, it was Smurf playing the Zarya then as well, right?
yeah. It was, but again, he wasn't that good. I feel because I watched his play in the replay viewer, just not
Yeah,
not impressed with it. I feel
that's fair.
I feel like to that extent we see Choi playing a little bit better. Uh, I mean, naturally he's had to play Zarya every now and then to be an off-time player at this level, right? So he has more of a sense of what a Zarya player should do. And well, but yeah, I think that's enough about the tank line. Should we move on to the DPS?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So there are 4 DPS with the shock this season. There's Tayo uh, and Striker, who've been carried over from last year, and Nero and Glister are the new signings. So really interesting choices by Crusty or whoever else is scouting for the shock at this point. Uh, but yeah, I think let's start talking about the best tracer in the Overwatch League, right? Let's talk about Striker. He's an absolutely top tier hit scan player. We always talk about how good his tracer is, but he's just in general really good on hit scan. We could even see how phenomenal his Hanzo was in the playoffs last year. Sorry, yeah, last year. It's 2021, isn't it? But yeah, so this guy, even though everyone thinks of him as a tracer player, he's pretty versatile on all hit scan roles, and like it's great that the Shock have been able to just keep him on their roster for so long because usually players don't stay on the same team for so long. But I think part of it is because of Krusty's because Krusty goes back with Striker when he was on the uprising. But yeah, I mean, really great job for retaining him. Then they've got Tayo, who's sort of, I think he's probably a backup hitscan player. The thing is, he wasn't utilized much last year. They brought him in on I think a couple of maps on Genji, and then they just put either Super or Rascal on Genji once again. So I don't know. He's just from contenders. He's known for his Ash and Tracer, but he could also be just like a flex player to play for whichever role requires his play style, right? Because I've watched him play on ladder on his stream. He seems to play a lot of heroes quite comfortably, and not just hit scan. So he plays like Pharah, Genji. I've even seen him play Doom, Junk. So I think his flexibility could come in handy for the Shock in case they need some like a special play style, and if he fits it. Uh, but yeah, those are my thoughts on the carried over players, and I think I'll get your thoughts on them first, Nightwing, before we move on.
Sure. I mean, we all know Striker's a superstar. He won playoffs MVP last year as well. Made a quick buck off of that. He's always been consistently performing on his Tracer. Uh, Even if you date back to season one, where they had that golden stage with Boston,
Hmm.
Striker was mostly just one tricking his Tracer and not really caring about much else. Boston in season one had maybe a few other letdowns, but Striker was definitely not one of them. And then when he transitioned over to Shock, he's really just been popping. Like his Tracer don't miss. And his Hanzo, as you said, was also great. I think he has a great sense for that hero as well. Um, yeah, I think he just works well with the team and works well within Crusty's system. So yeah, and obviously he's individually extremely talented. That always helps.
Hmm.
Um, as for Tayo, I think Tayo might have been kind of the kind of flex player that Krusty wanted, where you could just throw him on anything. Like obviously Rascal is there. Well, he's not there anymore, but Rascal was there. But
Hmm.
I think he signed Tayo for a similar purpose, where you could just throw him on anything. Uh, But Tayo did have some great showings with Third Impact, even though they were having some trouble dealing with Team Doge with Onicon and Kester back in contenders. Uh, I would say Third Impact was probably the second best team apart from that particular team. So Tayo has been a grinder. He has been consistently kind of showing off in contenders. Last year was a bit silent for him, just because we have better Genji players like Super on the team, so you can't really blame him for not getting played. But who knows? Maybe Super's gonna put down the shurikens this time, and we can see Tayo pop off.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, okay. On a completely serious note, honestly, I am not sure what they're doing with Tayo on this shock. I think he's a player with a good amount of talent, good amount of flexibility. Uh, I think his role within the team will only become clear once we actually see him play enough, because he has just not been given enough playtime yet to really be able to give a reasonable assessment. But considering that Krusty has had a lot of success with his roster, and a lot of people rate his coaching very highly, I think he probably has some plan for him. We'll just have to watch to find out, really.
Okay, then I think let's move on to talk about Nero because he's the guy replacing essentially Rascal, who was the core flex DPS of this team. And actually, I'll let you go first on him. Let's see what you feel he's gonna do for this team.
Nero last year almost got lulshed, honestly. Uh,
I
he
like that
had a
term.
Yeah, I mean, visa issues, having trouble working with your team. Obviously, they had to put in players that were kind of having an easier time because of the global situation. So it was more of Eileen being put in instead of Nero for Guangzhou last year. Um, but I think Nero has some potential as a flex player, and that's probably what they're banking on. Again, the issue with Shock compared to some of the other teams that we've kind of had a overview of is that they've just not played any kind of show matches compared to these other teams like Washington doing open scrims with Seoul, Dallas doing this Asian tournament, and then Valiant doing the Winter Ball. Shock is just kind of radio silence. They're just kind of counting the scrim bucks for now,
Mm.
and they're gonna surprise us in the actual season probably. I think Nero has a lot of potential. He does quite well on the rank ladder, which means he's putting in a lot of time to the game. He's motivated, and Hopefully, he can just work well within the system. But yeah, honestly, uh, I can't be too sure of how the balance between Tayo and Nero will go. I I think that's something that Shock are probably figuring out at this moment as well. What heroes to delegate to which player. Um, but I guess that's something we'll have to find out in next season. Well, this season, I mean. Um, as for Glister, oh wait, you wanted to go over Glister first?
No, you can start off. I'll talk after you.
Okay. I mean, it's no surprise to anyone if I say that London was pretty well, not disappointing, but not good. Obviously, like, I don't think many people were expecting too many things out of this the London roster, but that doesn't mean that it was a good team. Um, and Glister, I think, provided some of the better moments on that team just because of his freak individual ability. I think he is not quite the level of player that you would expect Ans to be, but I think that's the same kind of misconception or like um, prediction that people had for Ans. They weren't really expecting much out of him, apart from him being a widow one trick. But it worked out quite well for Shock in that sense. Um, Maybe Glister just needs the right environment to kind of thrive in. Obviously, his Overwatch League results in the past year have been kind of disappointing, but he has been kind of the bright spot of a bad team. And maybe on a good team, he can really develop himself to be a much better standard of player.
Hmm. Yeah, so let me jump back to Nero after I speak about Glister. But Glister's another, like you said, similar to how Ans was on this team, like, right? So he's probably been brought in to play all those traditional hit scans like McCree, Widow, Ash. I think he was a little bit overhyped coming into last season. A lot of people bumped London up in their power rankings simply because he was on the team, but he didn't really live up to the expectations, nor did London because of that. And although everyone keeps on saying, like, Glister didn't look too good because London wasn't too good, I think it's a little bit like people are overestimating uh, like how bad a team can look. Wait, actually, I'm framing this wrong. I'm just really tired. Long day. I think people are like not understanding how much of an impact an individual player can like seem to have even on a bad team. So I keep talking about certain players that stood out even on bad teams. Like, we will not call them bad players even if their teammates were bad. So for example, Myunbong, right? A much better flex support, like, than what his team would, like, you would expect his team to have. So the Boston Uprising were like really really bad last year, and Myunbong was one of the bright spots on their roster. He stood out even though he had a bad team. Then take a look at Shockwave, who was on the Vancouver Titans. He had a really bad team, but he really popped off, and he was essentially playing the same role as Glister. So I think it's like not a stretch to say that Glister was definitely overhyped coming to season 3, and maybe he will do better now since he is on a stronger team. I don't know if he's gonna pop off. I really don't want to put too much stock into him. But like, it's not that players always do well in Owl if they do well in contenders. So like, good luck to him. But I'm not sure how well he can actually perform. But yeah, I mean, he has Crusty behind him, so we can have some hope. So I don't really know what to think about him at this point. But let me then move on to Nero, who is, like I said, the flex DPS coming to this team, right? He's mostly been playing May, I think, since we've known him. Since that's the hero that's been the most meta for flex DPS players. Whenever he's been fielded, he also plays an amazing Pharah. I think he's one of the best Western Pharahs, at least in the league. Um, and We actually saw surprisingly good tracer from him last year for the like short duration when he did not have visa issues. So I think he's got a decently wide hero pool, but the heroes he is normally good at playing are like similar to how what I said about Jinmu, right, in our Chengdu Hunters review. He has a sort of specialist hero pool, but those heroes are rarely ever meta, or they're really niche picks. So the value he brings to the shock is not as much as Rascal would have brought, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I think he's at least an average flex DPS, so that's something for Crusty to mold into a potentially amazing player. And yeah, those are my thoughts on Nero and Glister essentially. Do you have any points to add?
It's not really a point that I want to add, but I think it's probably going to take Tayo and Nero together to kind of make up for Rascal's absence, because
Yeah.
that guy is a flex god. I mean, he kind of almost taught Baptiste players in Owl how to play Baptiste, and he definitely taught his own flex supports how to play Baptiste, because he's kind of the one that pioneered it when the hero came out and was available to play in Overwatch League. Um, I think they're probably going to need the flexibility of two players to kind of match that. And I can't wait to see kind of which heroes they kind of end up delegating between Nero and Tayo for the flex role. And obviously, Tayo has played some Tracer. You talked about a bit of Nero's Tracer as well, but we both know that they're they're not going to see Tracer play at all,
Oh,
because
of course.
Striker is right there, just standing there menacingly, um, with his mouse kind of hovering over the Tracer lock button. So yeah, the division of roles and how these players fit into the system is going to be interesting. I think it might just be that one player kind of gets perma fielded and the other one gets perma benched. But I think
Hmm.
Crusty does have a way with his tank players, at least, in rotating them in and out when they are required. So he might be able to find a good balance between these two players as well. That's pretty much all I have to say about the DPS. I think you were pretty spot on with Glister, so
Hmm. Yeah. So let's then move on to the support line, and I think this is once again a really great support line for the Shock. They've just lost Moth to the Gladiators, but they've gained FDGoD from the Paris Eternal in the process, and they have retained Twilight and Violet on flex support. So I want to talk about FDGoD first, right? He's a he's a really strong Lucio player, as we've seen, a true playmaker. And if you watched the 2019 World Cup, actually, he played BAP for France, and that was actually the hero he stood out to me the most on back then. His BAP was ridiculously good for like a main support player. Usually, you don't see main support players being exceptional on that hero, but there was just like he had a really amazing understanding for the hero, and his mechanics on him were also spot on. So BAP and Lucio are what he's essentially bringing to the table. But I have one major concern about him, right? Which is that he he's really known for making all of those individual plays, like going for those boop kills or just entering someone's backline and taking out their Ana, let's say, or a sniper of theirs. Whereas Moth's playstyle on the team was very team oriented. So I feel like Shock may have to switch their playstyle up since he's not a team oriented support like Moth. I mean, he worked really well with Paris because their structure enabled him to pop off. But I think so far what Shock has required is just someone to keep all of his teammates on the same page and just be a stable shot caller or a stable like what do you call it? Yeah, just essentially a shot caller and a planner for the team. So it's going to be, I think, a bit of a challenge for them to integrate him onto the roster, which might not work. Like I know that he's a great signing and he's a really good main support and things like that, but I have to, like, as an analyst, I have to think about how he'll fit in with this team on the basis of his playstyle. So that's my only concern. But other than that, I think it's a solid pickup. So what do you think? Do you agree with my points?
I think FDGoD did definitely show his stuff in the 2019 World Cup as well as last season with his Paris Journal. But I think it's you do make a fair assessment that I think Moth is probably a better fit for Shock because of his kind of shot calling and his not passive but very team oriented play style compared to FDGoD, which who just keeps trying to kind of frag on Lucio, um, which is which doesn't mean that he's a bad player by any means. It's just that when you think about the kind of plays that Shock make with Lucio, with Moth, you think about how they play King's Row with their kind of impeccable rotations around the map, where they pretty much just bait the enemy team into getting into a wrong position just by pressing W in a slightly
Yeah.
different direction. The kind of passing that Moth probably uh, synergized with along with Super on that map, I think is something that they will have to redevelop and really work on with the FDGoD replacing Moth. And that the success of that is something I'm a bit concerned about. Um, Obviously, he is a talented player, but uh, he is French. His English is probably not as refined as Moth's would be, of course. And I think his short calling is basically what's being called into question more than uh, his really his individual ability. But I think that's something that only a lot of scrims, a lot of practice can really fix, and we haven't seen much from the Shock so far. So while that is a concern of mine, I think uh, it's probably just good to be optimistic, but cautiously optimistic about what kind of Lucio play will FDGoD bring. Because I think for the other supports that he has to play, he'll sub in just fine. I think his kind of BAP play is perfectly viable with the kind of aggression he displays. And I mean, Mercy is just Mercy, and his Brig is decent as well. So yeah, I think apart from the kind of Lucio rotations I'm looking forward to, uh, from the Shock, there's no real other concern in terms of FD for me.
Okay. Would you like to kick us off on the flex supports then? Just share your thoughts on what you think, how well you think Twilight and Violet are positioned for 2021.
I mean, there's no other way to say this. They're just excellently positioned. They're
GG.
Yeah, I mean, they're just great players. They're literally DPS players when they want to be, and they can also be extreme assets on the support department to their team. Uh, Violet alone was already uh, just this black hole of death that would envelop you without you noticing it if you were on the other team, because this man puts up insane damage and really puts DPS players to shame a lot of the time. And Twilight is no slacker either. Um, I think them picking up both of these players means that not even means. I mean, they clearly showed that they are excellent at the double flex support uh, kind of team comp, and they're really set for pretty much everything with this support lineup. I think there is really not much for me to say. I think about these two players. Violet is an extreme fragger. He's good at pretty much every role, I think. And Twilight, obviously coming from his runaway days and working with the Vancouver Titans to bring us to the grand finale of season 2, he's just always been there, always been um, excellent. Wait, was he on runaway? Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I got him confused with I think someone else who there was this one player that was only on Vancouver but not on runaway, right? Who was
Rappel.
that?
Rappel.
Yeah, Rappel. Yeah. I got scared for a moment because I thought I'm pretty sure I've seen Twilight on Runaway.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah, these players are just excellent. There's nothing much to say about them. they're gonna do great this season, and no one can convince me of otherwise.
Yeah, so I'll talk about Twilight first. So once again, a top tier flex support, right? Outstanding Ana player. He was one of the best flex supports in season 2 of the Overwatch League when he was with the Vancouver Titans. When he left the team and joined the Shock in season 3, he really found his place. And the Shock initially just utilized him on Brig, if I'm not wrong, because Moth wasn't comfortable at that time playing the hero. So Twilight just sort of picked up Brig and did a good job on that hero. And really speaks to how good of a learner he is, and that's a really useful skill to have for anyone playing for our team, right? You should be able to pick up new heroes just like that. Simply, that's why having players like Rascal who can just learn new heroes in the bat of an eye is like can give you a major edge over the competition. So
They would also bring him in for Ana over Violet sometimes, if I remember correctly.
yeah, they would. So yeah, they really prefer playing Twilight on and I do believe Twilight is the better Ana player. Because for some reason, if I'm not wrong, right, when Architect was playing Ana for the Shock in the beginning of season 3, uh, I think Super mentioned in an interview with, I want to say Dogman on his show on YouTube. I can't really remember, but Super said that there was some communication issues with Violet on the Ana, which is why they had put Architect in. And then when they got Twilight, well, Twilight was probably the best Ana player in season 2 of the league. So it's a no-brainer that you just put him on the hero as long as he's half decent at communicating cooldowns with the team. So yeah, and then they have Violet to cover pretty much the remaining flex supports, right? Because his Zen is probably the best in the league. Bap's probably the best in the league. Moira's insane, as we've seen so far. Just a great flex support player. I think he works. Mm, he sort of reminds me of Jonak a little bit, right? Because he gets away with more stuff than a flex support is. Oh, by the way, I'm talking about Jonak from season 1, not the one who's been on this like scuffed NYXL roster in season 3. But so Violet from season 3 and Jonak from season 1, what's common is that their teammates enable them to get away with more than what a traditional flex support should, right? They were able to take up such aggressive positions as Zen or even Bap that like they would just be able to frag out without having to worry about their teammates at all. The teammates would be so good at taking up those optimal firing angles and creating space for Violet that it would just be like a free shooting gallery for him. So I don't think like Violet would do that well without the support structure. Obviously, leaving aside his mechanics, because mechanics are top tier. But the playstyle that he's able to adopt, I think his team just elevates it to the next level. He wouldn't be as effective if he were playing on with any other team structure, in my opinion. But yeah, still a really good flex support, and yeah, I mean the Shock have a great support line once again, and I think they are definitely in contention for being the best support line in NA at least. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the supports. Do you have any other points, Nightwing?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how much FDGoD can enable Violet's fragging this season, considering he is himself a very aggressive player. So those kind of peel rotations is probably something I want to look at this season, because obviously Moth would keep him topped up and sometimes even damage boosted um, uh, in previous seasons. It's just going to be interesting to see how FDGoD works with Violet.
Mm-hmm.
Could be another great support duo, but there could be some hiccups along the way as well. Hopefully that they can iron out. That's about it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about the San Francisco Shock's coaching stuff? Because I mean, they still have Crusty here. Uh, if you have any thoughts to share on him, I think I'll let you go first. Because I have like a couple of points to share with. I don't know if they'll be considered a hot take, but Yeah, I'll just let you start off.
I'll talk about the staff in general. I mean, eh, the elephant in the room is obviously Crusty. He's always just been exceptional, bringing Boston to pretty decent success when he was allowed to. Even though you hear some stories where he was not, because of certain divides on that team, he would not be able to coach all of the players at once. So he would kind of take certain players aside and coach them individually, one on one. The guy will go to kind of any length to make sure that coaching goes through the player's head, and I think that kind of dedication is what's made him probably the premier coach in the league. And I think it's hard for people to disagree with that. Obviously, contenders like Coach Moon would come up in someone's mind, but in terms of only results, you'd probably look at Krusty. And yeah, I mean, Krusty is great. Carores coming in from Atlanta Rain, he's probably someone that uh, Atlanta should have kept, as I think I mentioned in the Atlanta Rain uh, overview.
Yeah,
I don't know if I mentioned it, but it
you
is
did.
something I was thinking about. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think he's gonna do great on this team as well. He he'll probably play a key role in developing these players um that are coming in. Nero, Glister, FDGoD into the shock system, and yeah, I think that's gonna be pretty great. Agape coming in from London, I believe.
Yeah, probably brought Glister along with him, right?
Yeah, probably. He might have been the one that suggested it. I'm not really sure. But Agape, I mean, is the only other coach that has won the league as a head coach. So that has some merit to it. Obviously, London did not do that great in season two. And obviously, definitely did not do great in season three. But maybe Krusty sees some kind of uh, kind of coaching style in Agape that would help the team. And if so be it, then so be it. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Agape brings, but it's probably not going to be apparent from the team's actual play itself. But you'll only really see that in the results that Shock show. Apart from that, the the rest of the kind of staff is just like not that important, honestly. I think they're bringing like creating a great space for these players to work with. I think Shock takes very good care of their players and the energy org as well. So they have a great staff all around. Um, and yeah, I think in a time like this where many players are just getting extremely mentally boomed, you look at the kind of mental stress that players are going through. Even Super was mentioning, or this might be a bait, but he was saying he was considering retiring, but he's coming back for this fourth season now. And and a lot of other players from a lot of the other teams, while they don't come out and say it uh, maybe all the time, there are some prominent players that are just getting completely mentally boomed because of how bad the situation is. So having a good staff that is very supportive, that can really help you work through these extremely taxing esports player schedules. You have to scrim so much. Um, I think having a great staff is just very, very important for that. Otherwise, you end up with what most of the Overwatch League suffers with, which is huge player turnout, where players just keep retiring one after the other. Even with the shock stuff, you saw a player like Ans just get overwhelmed with the kind of stress that the lifestyle brings. So yeah, I think the staff is well positioned compared to many other teams in the league. Uh, yeah, I think I've talked a bit too much about this.
Oh,
I
that's fine.
I just want to I just want to kind of focus on the point that it's still a hard year. Players are still gonna have a hard time. There's no home stands. There's really nothing. They just kind of have to keep grinding into the oblivion, and then eventually a match shows up. They win. Um, so yeah, it's a rough life being an esports player.
No, I mean, the mental aspect of being an esports player is certainly important, and I'm glad that you bring it up whenever it's relevant, right? Because not a lot of people can understand what it's like to be in that scenario. So yeah, that like great points over there, and I think I'm gonna get a bit to my potentially hot take here, which is that like yes, Crusty is a great coach. He has led the Shock to two championships. Um, Always had great scouting, but I think he's got a little bit lucky in the sense that he's always been able to acquire the players that he's gone after. Like partly because the org is willing to dish out enormous amounts of money to get the talent that they need in order to get those championships. I mean, it's I don't think it's really a hot take because I'm not actually saying that Krusty is a bad coach. It's just that he's been able to get the resources he needs so far when he's been with the Shock. Even when he was with the Boston Uprising, I mean the team wasn't bad, but he was able to coach someone like Striker who already had great potential and mold him into being one of the best like hit scan players in the league, I would say. So overall, like he's really good. I would be very interested to see what he can do with players that like weren't probably his first or second choice. And I mean I'm not even sure that the players that he currently has are his first choice, but knowing that NRG like the salaries that NRG has been paying so far, like I mean Krusty just has a great story in that regard, right? He's got the cake and he's eaten it too. And I'm just really happy for his success, and I'm very excited to see what this guy can do, and if he can get the Shocker three-peat because he's clearly a very dangerous coach. I mean he's always been able to bring out the best in his players. He's been able to set up player rotations like no other coach has. I like every time I just remember him switching out DPS players in stage 4 of season 2. If you remember, it was the bunker meta, so it was Orisa Hog or Orisa Diva, and then he
Yeah.
would make players switch based on which hero was to be played on the map. He had like made his DPS players specialize in playing certain maps on some of their signature heroes. So like a true genius, this guy is, and really happy to see that he's been able to get Carores, who's finally been able to move from his. I think he was back in the Netherlands. He's been able to move to the Shock facility now and actually get some hands-on time with the players. And they've also got Agape, like you said, another coach with championship experience. So I think the Shock is really bringing in all hands on deck to make sure that they can get the three-peat this year. And I mean, what a storyline it will be if that actually happens, right? And I mean, I don't know if they've got what it takes this year because a lot of teams have really leveled up their game. But I mean, it's still a pretty competitive team. They've got a I think let's start rounding off the discussion here. But they've got a great tank line. They've got a good DPS line. They've got a great support line. I think they are at least going to be competitive in every single meta, if not one of the best. So it's like they are still pretty much a championship caliber roster. We will obviously not rank them just yet. We'll rank them in our special power rankings episode, which we'll do after we are done reviewing each team. But yeah, that those are my general thoughts on the Shock, and I'll let you go once again, Nightwing, before we round things off.
I think it would be a pretty fair assessment to expect them to win at least one tournament, honestly.
Yeah.
Uh, I think if they fail that, then maybe there's something to be concerned about for Shock. But I think they're in the right kind of headspace. They're in the right system. They have the right players. Um, that they maybe just need to develop a bit more with the newer players, and they're kind of set up for success because there's not any huge glaring question marks for the team. It's just maybe small, tiny question marks that they can iron out during the course of the season. And yeah, I think I'm very optimistic about Shock. I think they could definitely be looking at the three-peat, honestly. But the rankings episode comes later. That it's just that's a possibility. I think you'll definitely at least see them in the upper echelon of teams that you would consider to be suited to win the league this year as well. And yeah, I think Shock's just gonna do great.
Alright, and I think on that note, we can round off this episode. Thanks a lot to everyone who's been watching so far. We are really happy to have you and would be really happy to know your opinions on where you think the Sharks stand this season. So feel free to share them in the comment section. Please do subscribe to this channel. We will be putting out a lot more roster reviews before we can get to the power rankings episode. And which team do you want to do next, Nightwing?
I think we've covered a lot of NA teams. We should probably do another um, Asia region one. I think we could probably look at the one player that LA Valiant might be signing, or we could do Hangzhou Spark.
Oh yeah. All right. So then, yeah, the LA Valiant episode can be done later. As interesting as it may seem to discuss one player throughout one episode, but yeah, let's do the Hangzhou Spark next then, guys. If you would like to be notified about when we post that episode, please turn on your notifications and subscribe to this channel and help us keep the conversation about the Overwatch League alive. Thanks a lot for listening. We are signing off now. Bye bye.